Hi guys, today we're going to be having a look at an introduction to ancient Greece. This video is mainly for those of you who weren't here in week 10 of the term. You will need to have a look at this, pause it as we go and take some notes. So let's get started. Firstly, we have Australia over here and Europe here, so we're still focusing in this part of the world. We have Greece here in Europe to the northeast of the Mediterranean Sea. It is to the east of Italy, northwest of Egypt, and there's the UK over there for reference as well. All right, the geography of Greece. It has lots of indented coastline with gulfs and inlets. So that's these little bits of water, such as this in here, these in here. Basically means that there's lots of ability to move around with boat. Lots of mountains and highlands. The dark green all indicates the mountains. What this ends up meaning is that it's very difficult to get a united country because they're essentially separated by mountains. So you end up having places develop separately. So Athens is different to Corinth, is different to Sparta, and they end up forming quite unique societies. There's a very small number of adequate farming lands. So the flat areas are the ones that have to be used in here for farming. And that ends up meaning that when they run out of space for the population, they really do need to then expand. As you can see, there's lots and lots of islands, which creates a bit of a problem too. And the climate is fairly temperate, but it differs depending on whether they are on the mountains or the plains. This is a brief timeline of ancient Greece. So we can see if we compare it to Egypt, Egypt has their old kingdom pyramid building when Greece is still in its Neolithic basic period of just really small settlements. We then have the Minoans and Mycenaeans, their earliest civilizations during Egypt's Middle Kingdom. Their dark ages happen after the New Kingdom of Egypt has sort of ended, and their golden age kind of takes off after Egypt has basically fallen. And towards the end of that, they fall to Greek rule and then Roman rule at roughly the same time after that. So starting off with our subheading on the Minoan and Mycenaean civilizations, that's where we start. So the Minoans had King Minos, a legendary king at the time. We can't actually read their language, known as Linear A, but we do have a lot of archaeological evidence uncovered from Sir Arthur Evans, including the Palace of Knossos. Lots of artifacts such as murals with everyday realistic scenes. We know they were great shipbuilders, quite peaceful, and that a volcano called Thera erupted, disrupting their civilization. So these are some of the examples of the artwork. We can see bulls were important to their society, a model of their ship, and then this would be a snake goddess, a mother goddess type figure, and some frescoes in the palace. Lots of sea creatures, with them being an island civilization. They were then taken over by the Mycenaeans, who were a lot more warlike. We've got the legendary King Agamemnon there. We know that they took over after Heinrich Schliemann discovered their Acropolis. Language that they have is Linear B, which we can read. They have the artifacts of tombs, weapons, jewellery, and the city of Troy, which we thought was legendary until it was discovered. We know that they fell due to Dorian invasions and that they were a lot more warrior-like. So you can see the defensive walls here. This is a scabbard for a dagger, and lions guarding the palace entrance. So a lot more warlike as a civilization. We then enter a dark age, which is called this because of the great upheaval and chaos. Not a lot was written down. We've got some physical remains, not a lot, and basically no literary sources available. The Dorians came down here through Greece, and basically the Ionians and Aeolians moved out of their way. So this happens in the Dark Age too. Then we enter the Archaic Age, where they start to colonize the Mediterranean Sea. We see a lot of these places moving from oligarchy, where the rich rule in a small group, to tyranny, where there's one king. And city-states emerge, known as a polis. That's the Greek word for a city-state. Colonization means that there's more production and more things to trade. Land hunger ends up meaning they need more production to justify the land, and the wealthy start emerging. So if you have more land, you can produce more stuff. That means more wealth. You have more influence, more power, and then more land. There's lots of natural resources that the Greeks were after. So things like wheat, fishing, grapes, oil, iron, silver, gold, cotton. And you can see Greece itself doesn't have many of these things, but a lot of their nearby neighbours do. So that's where a lot of the colonization happens. These maps just show the development between the Greek city-states in blue and the Phoenician states in green, and they end up coming into conflict. So you can see by the 8th century, we have a heap of these different civilizations and colonies. That just continues to grow as the civilizations expand as well. We end up getting more and more of these colonies, and conflicts end up coming between the Greeks and the Phoenicians as these areas start to join. After 600 BC, new colonies didn't really happen so much because a really decisive battle was fought here off the coast of Corsica, and the Greeks essentially stopped a lot of their colonization. So the Carthaginians, the Etruscans, and then also the Phoenicians ended up defending their areas, and the Greeks basically slowed down their colonization as a result. Here's an example of what we call a colony family tree. So the original city of Chalkis spawned these colonies, but then some of these colonies then spawned a few of their own. There's another example of a colony tree. You can see some of those cities over here in the map. All right, then we enter the Classical Golden Age, also called the Hellenistic era, meaning anything Greek. Athens was the centre of the Greek world and developed democracy through people such as Solon, Pisistratus, and Cleisthenes. The city-state of Sparta went from a monarchy to an oligarchy, and rivalries began to grow between Athens and Sparta. This was put on hold for the Persian Wars, where King Cyrus conquered Lydia. He then crushed the Ionian revolt, and then there were a few key battles in this: the Battle of Marathon, the Battle of Thermopylae, and the Battle of Salmis Bay being the big 3 Persian wars. Athenian society, we see women's role not being valued and slavery at very high levels. The Athenians then move in an attempt to isolate Sparta, so they create this group called the Delian League. And then the Peloponnesian War sees the Spartan League and the Athenian Empire fighting each other. This sort of continues until Macedonia, which was in northern Greece up here, begins to invade and then take control of Athens and her empire. The end of the ancient world, of ancient Greece, really comes when Alexander the Great, the son of Philip, moves throughout Greece. So here in Macedonia, Greece then becomes an alliance and basically under their control. He then sweeps through modern-day Turkey, down into Egypt and through into Nubia, and then goes as far east as India. In this time, we see cultures blending, cities being founded, mostly called Alexandria. And then after his death, the empire gets divided and eventually conquered by the Romans. There's a number of literary sources to keep in mind for your assignments, including Homer, who wrote the Iliads, the epics, the Iliad and the Odyssey. Hesiod, who wrote a lot of poems. Herodotus, known as the father of history. He's a really big source to be looking into. Thucydides, Xenophon, Plutarch, Arrian, and Pausanias. This was the world according to Herodotus. You can see Greece, Italy, even France in here, Northern Africa, Turkey, they're all fairly accurate. And then the rest of it's sort of cut off because it was fairly unimportant for people in Greece at this time. Socrates was a key philosopher who tried to explain the nature of life through questioning. Plato was one of his students who started a school called the Academy, and then Aristotle was a student of Plato who wrote about science, law, poetry, and government. Alexander the Great also wrote a fair few sources. He was the son of King Philip II and conquered Persia, Egypt, the Middle East, and northern India. Died at the age of 33 from malaria. We then have the Phaistos disc, which was discovered in Crete. It was a Minoan disc, and although we can't read it, we do know that these are a lot of the repeated symbols, and this is what we assume they mean or represent. So it's possible that similar to the Egyptians, they just had a series of symbols to represent different people or different groups. Linear A, as I've mentioned already, we definitely can't read. This is an example of Linear A script. We really can't read what it says, so we have limited knowledge on the Minoans as a result. Linear B was the Mycenaean script, which is similar, but we can actually read that. We know there's 87 syllable sounds that are represented by the various documents. And these are some examples of how the Greek words have developed and how they've even been used today. So pharmako, pharmakon, meaning today medicine. It's where our word pharmacy comes from. So make sure that you've taken some notes on this information in preparation for term 3.